Now, it's important to recognize that both willpower and way power are required to be hopeful. So the idea is that I may be highly motivated for a goal. I just don't know how to get there from here. I don't know the strategies or the pathways to achieve my goal. In this case, we would be lower in hope. Now, alternatively, I may have the pathways available to me. I'm just not motivated to do that. So for instance, studying for an exam, working with a tutor, joining a study group are all pathways to achieving a better grade. But if I'm not motivated to do that work, I would be a lower hope person. You have to have both willpower and way power. So what I want you to do is just reflect for just a second and think about all of the times and all of the ways you use the word hope, even today. When you've used this word, what are some of the ways that we use hope in our everyday language? So for instance, I hope that you're well. I hope that you have a great day. In Oklahoma, we'll typically say at this time, I hope there are no tornadoes today or this week. And what I want to do is make sure that we understand that when I'm talking about hope, I am not referring to a wish. In fact, a wish is when we have desire for a particular goal, but we have no pathways, we have no control over that. Hope is about taking action to pursue your future. A wish is passive in the way we think about the future. Now, I want us to do this real quick experience of understanding the interplay between goals, pathway, and willpower. And obviously I can't see everybody right now, so you'll have to just kind of play with me in this exercise. But what I want us to do is for all of it, and by the way, with this particular slide, there's going to be about 4 really key takeaways on hope. And I'll point them out as we go along. What I'd like for each of us to think about is, and usually if I'm with you face to face, I'll have you raise your hand, but let's just think back in our youth and think about, for all of you, how many of you know how to drive a stick shift car or a manual transmission vehicle? And so what I want us to do is I want us to think back when that first opportunity that we had to drive a stick shift car, that very first time. And so our goal is we want to drive. The pathway that we have available to us is a stick shift car. So if we're going to drive, we're going to have to figure this pathway out. So, and I'm going to ask you to use the chat function here in just a second. But as we have the car started, we have the clutch depressed, and we're in first gear. So as we're starting to let that clutch out for the very first time, and please use the chat function here, but as you're starting to let that clutch out for the very first time, you're letting the clutch out now. What is your goal in that moment? And use the chat function. Yeah, not to jump it. Yeah. Oftentimes what people will say is not to die, not to kill the car, not to stall the engine. What I want to highlight is that a lot of those are avoidant goals. And so oftentimes when we've got these new pathways that we're experiencing, we're going to be in this framework of avoidant. And the reason that I think this is so important is because all of us set avoidant goals in our life, and all of us set achievement goals in our life. It's just that what we've learned is that high trauma children are more likely to set avoidant goals across their opportunities. So we let that clutch out, and in fact, we did kill the car. We stalled the car. Now, what I would like for you to think about is when you killed that car for the very first time in this scenario, what was going through your mind? What were some of the things that you were saying to yourself in your mind? And use the chat function again. So oftentimes, especially in this avoidant framework, we'll say things like, I'll never be able to do this. I can't do this. With high trauma kids, what we actually learned, or what we found, is that the self-talk becomes very harmful. It becomes things like, I'm so stupid. I'm a loser. And it is this way of self-evaluation that prevails about who they are. They are filled with the I can't. And lower hope children have this history of failed attempts at their goals. And so they're coming at any new goal from a framework of failure and negativity. Now, here's one of the key takeaways. When you stalled the car that first time, did you quit? And most of the time, the response is going to be no. And if I ask you, why did you not quit, right? What is the reason that you did not stop this pathway? And here's the key takeaway. The more you desire the goal, the more like you're going to face adversity to try to overcome it. This really highlights the importance of that goal, how desirable the goal is. And when we're working with children or adults, what we have to remember is it's their goal, not our goal for them. They have to desire the goal. So we start the car up, we're still in first gear, we let that clutch out. And this time when we let the clutch out, we actually lurch forward, but we're driving around. Third time we get in the car, we let that clutch out, we stall it. But what I want you to recognize is that this time, when I stalled the car after that previous successful attempt, the way that our self-talk starts to change. And our self-talk is now, hey, I did this before, I can do this again. And here's the takeaway: hope begets hope. What we've learned is that that opportunity for success made the future possible. And once the future is perceived as possible, then the hope starts to build, their willpower starts to build. And pretty soon they're driving. And we get that process. Now, this is the pathways component. What I want to ask you now is, how well can you manage your willpower while you're going through this new pathway experience, right? So think about how much of your willpower, how much of your attention is required the very first time you let that clutch out. And the answer is all of it. Now compare that to how much of your willpower is required today when you let that clutch out. And the answer is, I rarely do we even think about it, right? We've got that process. Now, what we also know about willpower is that it's finite. We only have so much mental energy to give every day. And we have to recognize that while we've got this pathway we have to learn, the rest of life is going on. So if we have a child who is in the classroom trying to learn new lessons, but they're wondering where they're going to eat tonight, or if they're going to be safe at home, or they don't know if good dad or bad dad is going to show up when they get home, and on and on and on. All of these things are demanding their willpower, keeping them from focusing on the pathways of school. What we've also learned is that unmitigated trauma is not an attention detractor. It's actually a hope robber. Trauma robs children of hope at a very young age.